Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this blue-green landfall combo deck, but before you click away, it's a little bit different than the landfall decks you might be used to up till now. We're basically foregoing the cheap mana acceleration like Llanowar Elves and Badgermole Cub, and instead adding blue for additional interaction and card draw to help find our key landfall cards, and those are, in my opinion, I Still Explore, to let us replay lands out of the graveyard and play an additional land each turn, and then the Might for Harmonizer, which is usually the card that kills people out of the landfall decks, as you can warp it, and then with the landfall we get to double a creature's power until end of turn, so if we can then combine that with a few extra land drops from the I Still, especially fetch lands like Fabled Passage, we can usually end the game on the spot, assuming we have a creature that can attack. We have seen versions of this in the past, even at the Pro Tour, splashing red for full bore, which is a way to maybe give your Warped Harmonizer haste, so you can attack right away, even with Trample, and that can potentially get the game over with out of nowhere. I'm not splashing red here just to make the deck a bit more consistent, and so we don't have to play with a full bore. That's often going to be a dead card in hand. So then if we take a look at the rest of the deck, we do have enough untapped blue sources that we can play on turn 1, 14 total, so we can keep up Spell Snare pretty reliably to counter an opposing 2-drop, so this can be a great answer to an opposing Badgermole Cub and other impactful plays. Can also be a great answer to instant speed removal that might be able to mess with our creatures once we're comboing off. And then Bounce Off is very well positioned, as it's a great answer to an opposing Earthbended land, as you can bounce it back and the opponent doesn't get it back into play right away, and can also be a nice answer to opposing landfall decks that are trying to go off with a Harmonizer, since you can just wait for them to make a huge creature, and then just before taking a lethal you just bounce it for 1 mana, and you can also use it to bounce your own creature in response to removal, so that also helps out against control, so it's not just a dead removal spell, and occasionally also very powerful in Best of One when facing the mono-white aura decks, which tend to put a lot of enchantments onto one creature, then bouncing it for 1 mana is a great answer. Then at 2 mana, Consult the Star Charts is another great reason to play blue in a landfall deck, since your I Still Explorer naturally ends up playing additional lands each turn, so then you've got more lands in play, making Consult the Star Charts more effective as you get to take a look at more cards, and since this is a combo deck at the end of the day, trying to assemble 2 or 3 different combo pieces, this is a great way to dig for those, and again, the more lands in play the more effective. Can easily play it with Kicker to now also provide a bit of card advantage in the process. Then Detect Intrusion is mostly here as a nod to the Kevero combo decks. Since we're not playing any main deck graveyard hate, this can still stop the trigger from Kevero, returning all creatures from the graveyard with Bringer of the Last Gift, so that can also buy you some time, and it's still kind of a pseudo negate that can also maybe stop opposing removal spells from taking out our creatures. Speaking of counter spells, Quandrix Charm is the latest addition from Secrets of Strixhaven, which can counter any spell unless the opponent pays 2, but also has the flexibility of destroying an enchantment or making a creature's base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. And that last ability may not seem super relevant, but on occasion it can make the difference between winning and losing if you can first make a creature 5/5 and then start doubling its power with a Harmonizer. Before you know it, we have 20 damage to win the game on the spot, even without having a ton of extra land drops from the I Still Explore. And then Stock Up is another awesome card draw spell, looking at the top 5 to select 2 of them, so it's also card advantage, but it digs pretty deep for those missing combo pieces. And then the Earthbender Ascension is our only other landfall card, and this one's also pretty important against opposing creature decks that might have some random chump blockers that can get in the way of a huge Harmonizer or I Still Explore. Now with enough counters, we can guarantee Trample on our creature, in addition to maybe some additional +1/+1 counters, so we can make sure we can attack for lethal in 1 turn. And then the mana base needs plenty of basics, so we can keep enabling landfall with I Still thanks to our many fetch lands. One-off Escape Tunnel can also be used to maybe make a creature unblockable before we start doubling its power, so that can also maybe replace the Earthbender Ascension against some creature decks. But of course Fabled Passage entering untapped has a lot of advantages over Escape Tunnel, but just playing 1 extra fetch land just to make our I Still more consistent. And then our blue-green dual lands can both be played untapped, producing blue mana for Spell Snare and Bounce Off, which is why we prefer these over the slow land that's also been introduced now in Secrets of Strixhaven. And then 2 copies of Basing Say to make sure we have a steady supply of creatures even against control decks, and also has some cool synergies with the fetch lands where we can maybe Earthbend onto them and then sacrifice them for extra lands and landfall triggers. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. We've got double spell snare, Ascension, Quandrix Charm. Missing a good card draw spell, basically. But we've got some okay interaction early, so I'll give it a try. Can keep up my island. Basing Say will be untapped. Opponent blue-red. Consult was a good one, so... We've got Quandrix Charm available. Ideally play this with Kicker. Opponent Jeskai Colors. Okay. I think we wait on Ascension so I can protect it with a Spell Snare in case they have a No More Lies. Because it's nice to get this going. Opponent's just gonna Helix my face, that's fine, not gonna fight over it. So it does appear to be Jeskai control. Ice still is great. So let's try the Ascension. I wouldn't be able to fight a 3-mana counter spell, but opponent lets it go. So, yeah, can target the Verge. And get another forest. And then I'll pass with Spell Snare up, I think. Opponent's got a tablet. And Inevitable Defeat is not getting cast. But could be relevant later, since I'm not going to be able to counter it with a Quandrix Charm. Alright, so if I play the Ice still, I don't have a lane to go with it. So instead I don't mind main phasing Consult to maybe find a fetch lane. And I did, alongside another Consult. So I'll play the Fabled Passage. And pass a turn. So now we're just missing the Harmonizer to maybe be able to combo off. Opponent flashes back the Inevitable Defeat. So if I Quandrix Charm the flashback, I guess I can still cast it thanks to the tablet. So yeah, that happens. So that's going to deal with the Ascension. Okay, so what's next? Can get the Ice still going, I suppose. Fetch with Fabled Passage. Play Ice still, get back Fabled Passage. And then I still haven't played a second lane, so I can try again. Did mill the Harmonizer, so our opponent knows what's up. But since I don't have any blockers, the trample is less important. The trample from our Ascension, that is. So replay Passage. And then probably just gonna pass a turn here so I can Consult with Kicker end of turn. I'll look for Harmonizer. Okay, opponent's gonna shut down Basing Say here, presumably. Or Fabled Passage. So let me fetch a response. Name is Basing Say. And split up to try and wipe the board. I mean, I can just bounce the Ice still here. Opponent's going to counter with 3 steps. I can counter back with Quandrix Charm. So I actually counter the split up now. So they counter the bounce off, I get to keep Explorer in play. So now if I find Harmonizer, I could just win on the spot. I guess I did get to draw discard by not countering the 3 steps, but that's fine. So yeah, I think we just start with... I could also play a 2-mana Consult, or I can stock up. I think we just 2-mana Consult for starters, since we're looking to end the game here. There's Harmonizer, so then now I can warp it. Play Fabled Passage, and then we'll target the Ice Still. Could still stock up, but I'm not going to be able to find anything relevant. And then 2 more, so we go to 16 and then 32. And our opponent's dead. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Spell Snare can be kept up with a Verge on turn 1, and then turn 2 maybe Fetch. This will be untapped, can stock up. So I'll give it a shot. Depending on the matchup, I may not need Spell Snare. And then we can start with a tapped Escape Tunnel. Against a red aggro deck, I will want Spell Snare available early. Does mean I wouldn't be able to maybe Quandrix Charm. So yeah, there's a bit of a compromise happening. Opponent just playing a tapped Sacred Foundry. Alright, now with Forest I can still keep up Quandrix Charm. If they had a Voice of Victory, we probably would have seen it, so then I could have snared it. So I might see a 3-drop instead. Yeah, that one's worth countering. So next turn, probably tap out for stock up. It doesn't look like we're spell snaring, unless our opponent wanted to double 2-drop, but since they missed their 2-mana play, it's unlikely that they drew a pair of 2-drops in the meantime. So yeah, let's just stock up. Find Ice Still and Harmonizer. Fabled Passage is also tempting, but I already have a fetch land even though it's tapped. So what's my sequencing look like if I take the 2 creatures? Next turn I would probably just play my fetch and pass with Spell Snare Detect Intrusion available. Turn after I can Ice Still. I do have a Consult, so maybe I'm better off going Ice Still plus Fabled Passage. So I can already play Ice Still and keep up Spell Snare next turn, and then I'll be able to leverage Consult with the extra mana to maybe find a Harmonizer. I'll squad heavy. So the red-white tokens deck, maybe they're heavier on the Goblin synergies, not sure yet. And we drew another Ice Still. So can fetch Forest and then plan to fetch Islands. And hope to convert Spell Snare. Raphael is worth countering. So may need an Ascension to trample over some of the opponent's tokens eventually, although I can also maybe use Escape Tunnel to make my creature unblockable before we double its power. Opponent also had a Voice, alright, so yeah, they baited out the Spell Snare with Raphael and resolved Voice, which is pretty good against us when we're holding another Spell Snare. But yeah, since they didn't play anything turn 2, either they played masterfully around Spell Snare, or they just drew a bunch of 2-drops in the meantime. I'll block a 1/1. More Ice Stills, not quite what we need. So whatever I do, I have to do main phase. So I think we're Fabled Passage into Kicked Consult. Probably just play Passage twice to build up my land count. Can maybe find a bounce spell for the Voice and then counter it on the way down. And do want to make sure I have enough basics left in the deck, but that doesn't appear to be a problem. mill the Harmonizer, unfortunately. So then now I can kick Consult. Don't need to sack the Fabled Passage yet. Found Harmonizer and Ascension. I think that's what we're going for. And then now I can already play the Ascension. Planning to just win next turn, if our opponent doesn't return the favor. Should not have difficulty enabling the Ascension by next turn. Alright, so we need to survive one more attack at least. Opponent does have O'Hare, but since they did not have a Raphael in play, we're not just dead on the spot. Does mean the Firebrand can now deal 4 damage, but only to our face, not to our creatures. So at this point I just want to prevent the most damage possible. So we're at 7. Firebrand can put me to 3. And luckily they did not have another burn spell left. Firebrand's gonna put me to 3. Alright, and now double Harmonizer should seal the deal. Play Fabled Passage. Not gonna worry too much about ordering my triggers since we'll have a lot of damage to spare. Just waiting on the 4th counter for Trample. And there we go. Could fetch once more, but it's not going to be necessary. Awesome. So yeah, very close one here against the red-white tokens. And that early decision to go Ice Still Fabled Passage I think paid off, since our draw would have been pretty clunky having to use Escape Tunnel instead. But as I've mentioned, could also use it to make our creature unblockable, and then we maybe don't need to trample. So there are advantages to having the Escape Tunnel in the deck. And of course, it's also another fetch lane to make your Ice Still a bit more consistent. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with pretty much the ideal hand to combo off. Now we do not have any interaction, which could come back to bite me. But yeah, Ascension, Ice Still Harmonizer with a fetch land, so we can present lethal pretty quickly. Opponents also blue-green, and with the Liner Elves, so they will be off to a faster start. Spell Snare is good to have access to. Just play the basics so it's not too suspicious. So I can counter maybe a Badgermole Cub. Yep. Ascension gets an island, and we even found Fabled Passage. So next turn Ice Still into Passage, and then hopefully Harmonizer can seal the deal. Opponent more of a Badgermole deck, looking to maybe set up Quantum Riddler. But yeah, let's stick to the plan. And then I could still consult without Kicker if I'd like. Plenty of basics left to get. And the Ascension's now online. Let's see, against this deck, should be fine to target the ice still, but we can always switch it up. Tapped Starting Town is awkward. And a Battle Crier, I see, so that's their combo. Okay, well, we could see some fireworks here, but they're down to 1 mana. Another Weaver's fine. So yeah, that's the end of the road for them. I can fetch. And then, yeah, we should have it here with a Harmonizer. Could still consult, maybe find a Quandrix Charm to deal even more damage. Or get a bounce off to clear a path, but it should not matter. Warp Harmonizer, could also just cast it. And then now I want to go full control. So I can first get the +1 counters from the Ascension, and then double with the Harmonizer. Just a small optimization, but in this case it shouldn't matter. I guess I messed this up. Yeah, I should have let Ascension trigger resolve first before fetching. So I got ahead of myself. But yeah, just so you know. And then we can still play another Fabled Passage, so don't even have to fetch. This will be more than enough. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got Spell Snare for interaction. Detect Intrusion can help. And then Ice Still to make a bunch of mana with Fabled Passage. So I am missing maybe a bigger card draw effect to dig towards Harmonizer. But I think I try this. Can keep up Spell Snare, but won't need it until turn 2. Opponent blue-white. Yeah, I'll keep up the Detect Intrusion just in case. Opponent on maybe a 4-color control deck. There's the Harmonizer, alright. So, sequencing from here on out. Play tap, land, and pass. May have to wait to protect the Ice Still with a Detect Intrusion. Ascension's not bad. So, can try and keep up Spell Snare to protect Ascension from a 2-mana counter. Wouldn't be able to detect Intrusion, but maybe that's fine. So then I do want to play like a Verge for now. Opponent's gonna No More Lies, so we get to Spell Snare it. And get an island. So then next turn I could Ice Still after having fetched, so I can immediately get back the fetch land. Opponent does now have a 4-drop. Get Lost on the Ascension. Could have been worse. Still has maybe Lightning Helix up. Yeah, let's go for the Ice Still. Since we already have Fabled Passage, I'm not too worried about needing to mill more cards. On the contrary, it's better if our opponent sees fewer cards. So replay Fabled Passage. Don't have to sacrifice it right away. Opponent had a Seer, in fact. Can Detect Intrusion it. Question now is whether to enweb or not. I don't think it's worth it. Just cast it for 2. And then if I fetch now, I can explore. I think I'm better off waiting. With double Harmonizer in hand, the fetch lane's quite valuable. But it would help play around another 4 damage effect, perhaps. Opponent's gonna keep up 5 mana. And stock up the draw. Can start by warping a Harmonizer and see what happens, since I've got another one. Maybe they counter this. Yeah, 3 steps, fully tapping out. That's what we like to see. So now they should be dead to another Harmonizer. Have not played a land yet, so we get to replay Fabled Passage twice. Can also explore in the meantime to maybe hit a +1 counter. And this is already lethal, so don't even need to replay Fabled Passage. So yeah, the 2 landfall cards, backed up by just enough interaction to protect them. That's all you really need. Going to show that these are the most important parts of the landfall deck. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got double stock up, Ascension, no interaction, but enough card draw to be able to assemble all the combo pieces. I'll try it. It's definitely not perfect, but at least we have a Fabled Passage for when we eventually find the Eye Still. Opponent blue-red. And another Ascension, so mana aplenty. That looks like a more controlling deck. Start with the Ascension, build up my mana before we worry about drawing cards. And get a second green. Now I did draw a lot of basics here, so I may eventually run out. And our opponent's gonna Firebending Lesson the island, so they are on a lesson deck. Ascension up to 2 counters. And Spell Snare the draw. So I can Ascension leaving up Spell Snare. In case they try to quench here. Alright, they had a 3 steps instead. That works. Still have our double stock up, which will be nice to resolve, although another Ascension first. Pretty happy if they fight over this one. Alright, so land stock up, Ascension is online. And find Harmonizer plus Fabled Passage. Still missing the Eye Still Explorer. Opponent maybe trying to mill us out. And a Basing Say is also quite good against control. So maybe start with Basing Say. Still going for stock up, and then at the very least I can Earthbend. Find Eye Still, and probably go for Spell Snare. So I could try to tap out for Eye Still. They might have another 3 steps. If they have the Quench instead, I'll be a little disappointed, maybe. So I don't hate Earthbending, just to give us an extra creature going forward. Opponent's gonna Consult, would be a nice one to Spell Snare. Can even Spell Snare it even when they cast it with Kicker, since mana value is still 2. Can see another burn spell on the island, perhaps. Yep. Okay. So I think we start with Eye Still, replaying Fabled Passage out of the graveyard. And then I can still Harmonizer, so then play Fabled Passage, counter on Eye Still, so it's harder to burn. Okay, and then tempted to play another Ascension before we fetch. If I Earthbend onto Fabled Passage, I will still get an untapped land out of it, which is enough for Spell Snare. So I want to keep the basic island in the deck. And then Could maybe put another counter on the Fabled Passage, although I'm probably going to end up sacrificing it. And then I could also hang on to another Fabled Passage, but we should have enough lands left. Alright, and then probably just pass. And then next turn we can set up our combo finish. Opponent's gonna pass with 6 mana up. Alright, so they could still have all sorts of counter spells here. But step 1 has to be a Warp Harmonizer. And see what's up. That works. So I'll start by fetching with Fabled Passage, and yeah, opponent knows that they're dead. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We've got what looks like a Keeper. Can Quandrix on 2. And then try to find a third land, which we did. So then now I don't mind Time Breeding Pool. Opponent is on aggro and gets to resolve a Sharpshooter. Can keep up Quandrix Charm to maybe counter their next play. And the Howl Squad we don't want to let resolve. So then next turn I could consult without Kicker, or now I can stock up. Finding Ascension is going to be important to trample over the opponent's blockers. Should have enough lanes. Quandrix Charm could also help to pump up our creature. War Leader's Call, scary. So if they have something like O'Hare Ashonil, the Red God, I could just be dead next turn. So let's see. If I play Fabled Passage, Ascension, Earthbend onto the Fabled Passage, I can sack it to get an extra land, but I'll still only have 1 mana left up, which means I wouldn't be able to Quandrix Charm. Detect Intrusion with Enweb could be a thing that happens. So, yeah, deciding whether or not I want to play the Ascension before or after the Fabled Passage. I think I Ascension before, even though Earthbending onto Fabled Passage gives me kind of a free chum block if I want it. So I can still Enweb with Detect Intrusion if needed, but ideally I get to keep the land in play. Another call is not necessarily game over. So I can take 6. And I actually like my chances here. So I'm gonna wait on Fabled Passage until after we Harmonize her, maybe. Ice still doesn't hurt, but I may not need it. So I can start by warping Harmonizer. And then, yeah, with double Fabled Passage, that should be all we need. So I don't think I even need the Quandrix Charm to pump up my land. So play Fabled Passage. Target the lands. Fetch. And getting forests. Couple triggers on the stack. So I can let the Ascension trigger resolve. And then fetch to get an island. And then I could still Quandrix Charm, making this a base 5/5, and then let all the Harmonizer doubling resolve. And that's going to be way more than enough. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got a hand that's missing Ice Still Explorer, pretty much. Maybe some card draw would also help. But I'll try it. We've got early interaction with Spell Snare and Detect Intrusion. Don't have to keep up Spell Snare turn 1 since we're on the play. Opponent black, green. There's Eye Still, alright, so that was a great draw. So now I just need to make sure I get my 4th land. Ascension would be our best top deck. So we can also make sure we have Trample. If our opponent's on a Reanimator deck, Detect Intrusion can also be a way to counter a Kivero trigger. But I can also counter a Town Greeter. Badgermole Cub, I'm always happy to counter. It's almost like the art is depicting a Badgermole. Okay, so Breeding Pool we can play tapped. So this might be kind of the Sultai Skeleton pile with the 4-mana copy spell. Don't think I'm detecting the Badgermole trigger. Opponent did not attack, so they wanted to keep up. Maybe a removal spell, I'm not sure. But I think we still Eye Still here. And then Fabled Passage. Pass a turn. So yeah, without Trample, I might struggle to get past the opponent's blockers. As they resolve Ouroboros. So yeah, turns out our opponent did not have another land, so detecting the Badgermole trigger could have delayed Ouroboros by another turn. And now a Consult. So, sequencing, I can at the very least force them to chump with Badgermole, which could be reasonable. Then again, I have to be careful that our opponent doesn't copy the Ouroboros with 6+1 counters on it. So then keeping up Detect Intrusion would be useful. So I'm not entirely sure how I want to sequence my turn here. If I start with a Warped Harmonizer, I can fetch, replay Fabled Passage, but it's unlikely that I find the right pieces to get through right now. So maybe we wait, and then just cast a Kick Consult, maybe find a bounce spell to buy us some time, and then next turn we can try and go for it. So I can play another Fabled Passage. Can play this now. Find a bounce off and the Ascension. So these are really the pieces we need. So then I'm not opposed to just bouncing the Ouroboros now. And then if they have to tap out to replay it, that's fine by me. But next turn with Ascension we should have it. Intrusion can protect from any removal spells. So yeah, Ouroboros resolves. Can let that resolve, even though I could counter it with the Intrusion. And yeah, opponent seems very dead here. So we can play the Ascension. Should have probably Warped Harmonizer first. Since I missed out on a few landfalls from it. But I'm sure we'll manage. So fetch Fabled Passage. And get some more triggers. Could optimize my Ascension triggers to resolve before Harmonizer. May as well. So 24 power Trample is already enough to attack past Ouroboros to deal 20 damage, but we can still play Fabled Passage one more time. But yeah, we don't need to overdo it. So 50 power with Trample will suffice. And there we go, awesome. So yeah, this deck seems to be the real deal. Went undefeated so far, albeit in a small sample size. But yeah, we faced a wide variety of archetypes, all the way from aggro to pure control, and the deck seems to be holding its own. So yeah, it goes to show that you don't need Lanor Elves and Badgermole Cubs to ramp out your green cards. All you really need are the Eyestill Explorer and Harmonizer from the Landfall package, and then the rest can be blue card draw and interaction to help assemble these two cards more consistently. Could also splash red for full bore, which is something we've seen before, even in the Pro Tour, to give your creatures haste to be able to win out of nowhere. But of course, splashing a third color makes your mana base a bit more awkward, and you also end up with a dead full bore in hand most of the time, so I haven't really found the red splash to be essential, but it can of course give you a leg up in certain matchups where you expect mostly sorcery speed removal. But again, the counter spells should cover that as well. So yeah, pretty happy with where this deck ended up. Give it a try and let me know how it goes for you. And it's definitely the type of deck that has a lot of different lines of play, even more so than just a green landfall deck, since now you've got all this blue card draw and interaction. So it's definitely not the easiest and most straightforward deck to play, but if you master it, it feels like it's got a lot of potential. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. And as always, have a nice day.